Broadcasting live from Youngville, North Carolina and Ontario, Canada. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly show where Vicki Rowe and AJ Aramutz bring you the mead news, meadery info, and mead-making discussions from all over, talking with mead makers, mead owners, industry mavens, and influencers. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly podcast about mead and the people who love it and where the mead world is going. And now here are your hosts, Got Mead owner Vicki Rowe and mead and wine maker AJ Aramutz.
Live from the den of the puppies of the apocalypse, which is about to get inundated by flow in the next couple days, the Bunny Pen in Ottawa, Canada, and South Dakota with our special guest host, Tom Repas. It's Got Me Live. Welcome to the show. This week we're going to be talking with Thomas Hubbe, who is one of the owners of Bee Seasonal Honey, and they are bringing in sustainably sourced Brazilian honeys that are really good. Got to try them at the MeadCon this year, and they were really, really good. So we figured we better get Tom in here since he's kind of our resident honey expert and have him help us out. So welcome, Tom. It's good to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
Those of you out there know that we do this because, like you, we love mead, and what we're hoping to do at some point in the hopefully not too far future is upgrade to better software, hardware, and all of that. I'm still researching all of it. But all of that costs money, of course. So I just wanted to say thank you to the folks who signed up or renewed their membership with as a Got Mead patron. Thank you very much, because that helps keep not just the show but the site and all of the other stuff running so that we can continue to bring you more mead info. So it's very much appreciated. If you haven't signed up and you're a listener, we'd really appreciate you considering it. It's only $30 a year. Get you access to the patron boards on gotmead.com, get you into the Facebook group on the Facebook patron group. So $30 a year. Help support the site, the show, and really everything Got Mead does. So we hope you'll consider that. And again, thank you so much to those of you who signed up and who have renewed. It's just awesome. I love seeing that, and it's very much appreciated. If you want to listen to us, you can listen to us live at gotmead.com. Just click Got Mead Live Radio Show. There's a player right there. It'll be live when we are, and when we aren't, it's showing whatever the last most recent show was. You can also, there's a drop down there where you can click to see a list of all the shows we've ever done if you want to go back and play catch up. You can also catch us on iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spreaker. All of those carry the show. Just search Got Mead Live. Replays go all the way back to the beginning of the show. You can find us online at gotmead.com, of course, and then Facebook is facebook.com/gotmead. That's the page. Facebook.com/group/gotmead is the main group. Twitter, we are at gotmeadnow. Feel free to tweet us. I'm usually watching during the show. And of course, I get emails when I'm not. So if you want to tweet us, I usually see it. If you want to send us any questions or suggestions for people you'd like to see on the show, just feel free to send it over to us. You can either email me directly at gotmead@gotmead.com, or you can go to the website, put your mouse over Got Mead Live Radio Show, don't click, and grab the drop down where that'll take you to a question form where you can send it in. And if Skype's behaving and you want to try to call into the show, and no guarantees there because Skype has been doing some pretty weird shit lately, you can try to call us at 803-443-MEAD. That's 803-443-6323. Whew. Okay. So, what you drinking, Tom?
I actually have an IPA.
I'm sorry, we can't have you on the show anymore.
Yeah. I have to work early tomorrow, so I couldn't have anything too potent. So I just grabbed a single bottle out of the local store, and it's called Elevation IPA, and I just grabbed it, and it's from Roosters Brewing Company in Utah, actually, of all places. So yeah, it's very hoppy. And as we were talking, some of the IPAs have gotten a little bit overly hopped, more than I like. But this one is not too bad, but it is pretty hoppy.
You are kinder than I am. I tend to get a little ranty about how hoppy they make these things these days. But Okay.
I don't mind the hop flavor, but the bitterness really gets on my nerves.
I love the taste of hops. I mean, hopped meat is some of my favorite meats, but it's the whole,
fug will smell amazing.
hop it until it dies a hoppy death kind of thing that just
Hop
kind
it.
of, it's like,
Yeah,
seriously?
they just overdo it, and it's like if I wanted to chew on some hops, I would just put them in my mouth, rather than having them in my beer. But it's nice. I mean, I do like occasionally bitterness to do some thirst quenching.
Yeah.
Well, especially after all the honey you deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can spend the day all sticky and covered up in sweet things, I suppose. Yeah, it's. And then all of the unspeakable things you do with the bees.
Nice.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, go dig up the episode with Tom back in the history, and there's some crack up moments.
It's about the birds and the bees, but without the birds. The birds and the bees with it, but just exactly.
So if your parents haven't explained that to you, you can go listen to Tom, and he will. No, guys, it is not a PG-rated show. That's why we are marked as, restricted. So, what you drinking, AJ?
I have got a glass of Meridian Hive's Broken Crown. It's a raspberry chipotle. It's got a really pleasant flavor. I was having trouble finding the heat for the first couple of sips, and I'm thinking it probably sneaks up on you after a while, so I'm going to have to keep drinking this and get back to you on that. It's got a really pleasant flavor. It's got an interesting, familiar phenolic thing going on with the aroma that the only place I've encountered that before has been with strawberry wine, both mine and professionally made. So it's interesting to see that happen in other places too. It's really pleasant, and I'm going to have some more.
Yeah, I like their chipotle meads. They're yummy. I like lots of the chipotle meads I've had. So, I went rootling through a box that I had sitting there and had no idea what it was in it, and out came a bottle of Bee Nectar's tequila barrel-aged pineapple melomel. And Brad's been playing with tequila and gin and all kind of not usual barrels lately, so he's coming up with some interesting stuff. I was hesitant about this until I tried it at the tasting room, and I pretty much fell in love with it. It's really good. It's got these when you get the nose, it's definite barrel notes, and there's this sort of sharp tequila thing in there, and then you get the fruitiness of the pineapple coming up behind that, and when you taste it, it's actually creamy. It's got this silky smooth creamy texture to it, and there's these sharp tequila notes that are all wrapped up in the silky pineapple. So, and then it's got this kind of long tart tequila like finish. So really nice. If you're anywhere near Bee Nectar, I would suggest you go get some before it's gone, if it's not already. And I don't know if they sell this online, but their website is beenectar.com. That's BNEKTAR.com. But this is good stuff. And it's a good thing it's only in at 350 because I'm pretty sure I'll have to finish all of it.
Hard times.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, so just a quick PSA for our upcoming guests, Be Seasonal. Get exotic Brazilian honeys from sustainable beekeeping operations at beeseasonal.com. And if you're an AMMA member, check your email for a members-only sale going on right now. So definitely worth looking into. I've tried all of their honeys and can attest that they are quite good. Some really interesting flavors. The pink peppercorn one was my particular favorite. So let me go ahead and get Thomas in here, and we'll get things going. Tom, have you started making more mead? I thought you were almost out of honey there. Yeah, because you forgot to save your own honey.
Yeah, well, I always have honey, but I didn't save any of my wonderful 2014 Clover Honey, which is the one that I got my 2 best of shows with. I sold it all, so I was like, I should have kept more. So this year we have a pretty decent Clover year, and so I'm going to be keeping a lot more of it so I don't run out. Because it's kind of embarrassing when a beekeeping mead maker doesn't have enough of their own honey. not that there's not other honeys to try, of course. But,
hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Thomas.
Hello.
Welcome to Got Mead Live. You've got myself, AJ, and Tom Repas here.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Thomas is hanging
Good to
out
talk
in
to you again.
Baltimore tonight. So, did you get to find Charm City Meadery, Thomas?
Yeah, I didn't have time yet. Maybe tomorrow. We'll be here till Saturday, actually till Monday. So there's still a lot of time ahead of us. But today was just some organization and dealing with the weather that is not so good compared to Arizona, I guess.
It's gonna get worse. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Cool, yeah. Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. This is the first time that I'm doing something like this, so yeah.
It's just a phone call between friends. No worries.
That sounds good.
Yeah, we're pretty laid back around here. So, I don't know if a lot of folks know who you guys are. I mean, I hadn't heard of you until you came to the MeadCon, or until I talked to you before that, and then you came to the MeadCon. So, tell the listeners out there, who are you, who is Bee Seasonal, and how'd you guys get into this?
So, hello everyone. My name is Thomas, and I'm originally from Brazil. I studied biotechnology in the university. I'm an engineer, and I moved to Germany where I got a master's degree in brewing technology. I wanted to be a beer brewer, actually. And that's where I met my wife, Larissa. She was working for a Scottish brewery called Brewdog. I guess that the brewers around there probably know who they are. And we met in Berlin, and we decided that we wanted to do something together, right? And to start something in the brewing industry is kind of expensive, and there is so much competition around there that we were thinking about what could we do. We definitely wanted to do something together and something related to food. And Larissa had this idea, cooking already for a few years, of a honey company that would bring some pretty unique honeys to the market in a very transparent way and very sustainable. And she asked me if I wanted to do this together with her, and I said, hell yeah, well, let's do this. And it was pretty interesting that Larissa, she always had this connection with the food industry in general through her father. And at the same time that we met, her father met this guy in Brazil who happened to be a very, very good beekeeper, as well as someone that runs a co-op with certified organic beekeepers in Brazil. His name is Henrique. He's the guy that we talk about on our website a lot. He is basically, I don't like to call him our supplier. I like to call him our partner, because he's a masterpiece in this and all this business that we're building right now. And we decided to start bringing some kind of unique honey varietals to the American market. Not saying that the honeys that we have here are not beautiful and unique, but something different. And we take a lot of inspiration in what some European companies do when it comes to flavor profiles and where these honeys are coming from, and really telling people, pinpointing on a map and saying, okay, this is the region where this honey comes from, and this is why it tastes like this. And these are the people who are involved. And for us also, the organic aspect, all our honey is certified organic. For us, this is something very important. We believe that the organic certification does establish some interesting guidelines, but they are only guidelines, right? And there's so many amazing beekeepers out there doing such a wonderful, sustainable job, and they don't have a certification, and that's totally fine. But right now, we are lucky and happy to have partnered with Breyer in Brazil, who happens to be able to harvest some pretty interesting wild honeys. And this is a very important aspect of the honeys that we are bringing now to the market, and these 4 honey varietals that we have now available, is that they are all wild honeys. things, right? They are not a byproduct of a pollination service, or they are basically harvested from natural preserves or places that are still very remote and clean, and and they have a pretty interesting flavor profile. I don't know if everyone there already tried them, but I consider them pretty unique, and I've tried quite a bit of honeys from around the world already, and they are quite kind of special.
So it sounds like this third partner, if you will, is kind of he's your main contact in Brazil then for the honeys?
So the interesting thing is that it's a third generation family of beekeepers already, and they run this organic co-op too. And I actually grew up consuming their products, and I didn't know that. It was just when I went back to Brazil 2 years ago to meet him, actually, that he showed me the packaging, etc. And I was like, well, I grew up like consuming this propolis. I grew up eating this honey, and he said, "Yeah, this is our stuff." And he's 3 hours from where I grew up. Curitiba is the name of the city where I grew up, and he's pretty close by. And he, it just happened to, I don't know, it was just this wonderful coincidence that this guy showed up in our lives at this moment, and from like a place where I grew up, so everything worked super well. And yes, in Brazil we only work with Briar, and he's our partner there. There is a very interesting loyalty going on between us, and we are very happy and consider ourselves very lucky.
That's pretty cool. I think that not so much a coincidence, but just the thing that needed to happen when it happened.
It's so interesting too with
Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
With beekeeping in Brazil too, a lot of folks who are not familiar with beekeeping, or even with beekeeping out of the United States or Europe, they're not familiar with the history behind that too, and how they basically came to embrace the Africanized bees. At first, when those were introduced, not on purpose. Well, they were brought over purposely, but not released purposely. They had all the issues with the defensive-ness, and all the beekeepers that were used to working with the European bees, at least in the early years, did not know what to do about that, and they came to embrace them and really discover that for a tropical climate, they're actually a much better bee. Except maybe you're not going to put them in your backyard in the suburbs, obviously. But Brazil's really become a very well-known honey producer, and one of the few countries that can really truly has organic honey, because a lot of the bees can be kept in places away from agriculture and whatnot. Yeah, no, that's true. This is something very interesting. I have a lot of people asking as well. I mean, you guys have Africanized bees in Brazil. And I mean, aren't they like aggressive? Isn't it like difficult to work with them? And I really like to hear you saying that they're defensive, right? They are not aggressive. They defend themselves. And I mean, I've seen these guys, working with these bees without gloves, without like much, suit or covering. And I mean, I don't know. It's just some people have this special touch, I guess. It is pretty nice. Yeah, the honeybees were not native to the New World, so they were not native to North America or South America, and they were brought over starting in the 1600s from Europe. And so the European bees were in Brazil, and they survived, but they really didn't thrive. And so I think his name was Dr. Kerr, brought different types of African bees over, hoping that the more tropical adapted bees would do better in South America. Also knowing that the ones that he brought over were more defensive, hoping that he could breed that out. And accidentally, a visiting beekeeper that released them. They had queen excluders in front of the hives, and if anybody knows anything about bees, when they want to reproduce and form another colony, the bees will fly off with the old queen, and then the bees that are still there will raise a new queen. Well, the visiting beekeepers supposedly removed the queen excluders, and 26 swarms escaped. And they thought that, well, that's only 26 swarms, and there's so many European bees around, they'll just be, genetically diluted, and it won't be a big deal. But it turns out the African bees are so well adapted to tropical climate that they basically out-reproduced, and all of the European genetics that were there, 95% of them, from South America through Latin America and southern United States, was pretty much vanished. I mean, they're not 100% African bees. That's why we call them Africanized. But they're very adapted. So, for example, like European colonies, if you put them near a crop, like let's say you're trying to pollinate an orchard, they will go to the high resource flowers, and they're very good, and they'll ignore everything else. But the Africanized bees, because they're in a tropical environment where you might have a tree blooming over here and you might have some flowers over here, they will go and seek out nectar sources that maybe the European bees wouldn't focus on. And that's why they can do better than the European bees in a more tropical environment. But they don't survive where it's cold, because they don't store the honey, they don't form a winter cluster the same way the European bees do. So in that way, they're not really adapted to be living in the north or even in high altitude. I know in South America, they only went so far south. I don't know exactly how far south, but down towards Argentina, or only so far high in the mountains, in the Andes, they could only go. And above that certain altitude, there still are European bees, and below a certain latitude south, there's primarily European bees also. So it's very interesting how this introgression of the African genetics came in. And again, at first they didn't know how to manage them. They didn't know how to handle them. And, they were worried. A lot of beekeepers stopped keeping bees at that point, but there basically was a 180-degree turnaround where they have embraced these bees, and they're proud of them. They know how to work them. They have to use a lot more smoke. They can't, you're not going to be moving them around doing pollinating and it's just dropping them on the side of the road near where people or livestock are, because they are more defensive, and that'll stir them up, obviously. Even European bees get stirred up when they're carried around on a semi, of course. But yeah, it's been a really interesting story how, something that was predicted to devastate, beekeeping in South America. Now Brazil, I think, is one of the top honey producing nations in the world. I don't remember exactly where they are in ranking, but it really changed around in those decades since they were introduced.
Yeah,
there's certain advantages too, but and it's very difficult to be an organic beekeeper, because for number one, you can't control where the bees fly. If you wanted to raise cattle, you could just put them in a pasture and, fence them in, and you could control what you fed them. But bees will fly wherever they go. But if you're in an area that's very remote and there's not any, modern agriculture using pesticides and herbicides nearby, and then they tend to be more resistant to some of the common parasites that affect European bees. So it's not like they must avoid using those treatments. It's that they don't need to use the treatments that we use for treating mites and other problems that we have up here in the United States and other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Told you I had a bee expert.
So the other thing, I was poking around on your website, and I saw that somebody asked about the stingless bees, and that's another. We're talking about Apis mellifera, the Africanized bee, but in tropical parts of the world, not just South America, but also in Africa and in Asia, there's other kinds of bees
Mexico
too.
As well,
the Melipona and then the Trigona, and there's many hundreds of species of those. I'm not familiar with them, obviously, because I'm not from there and I haven't worked with them, but they're very interesting and very, very different than the honeybee that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a neighbor of mine that he had a little hive of, we call them jataí in Brazil. It's a little, like minuscule, like bee, and a stingless bee from Brazil, and it's a Melipona, and they're so docile, and they are so, you feel that they are almost kind of naive to some extent.
Uh-huh.
And they store their honey in honey pots, right, instead of the frame, which makes it very difficult to extract this honey, actually. So commercial production with these bees is very complicated, and they don't produce a lot of honey as well. And another thing that is very interesting is the moisture content for these honeys, right? I mean, the honeybees, or in general, they close the cells once they reach a certain water content, like humidity in the honey. And so these stingless bees, because they don't close any cell, this honey that is kind of like extremely raw and has a water content of up to 22%, let's say, something like that.
Wow.
It starts to ferment a little bit, so it's a more acidic honey. And I think that, I mean, we don't understand everything about it, but it probably works as some kind of like probiotic for those bees, I guess. And it can be very interesting, but it's very difficult to work with this kind of honey because it does ferment very quickly.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So I
But
appreciate you.
To have in the backyard, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I appreciate you putting the names of the actual Latin names of the different plant species too, because I don't know, I don't know Portuguese, and some of the common names can be confusing too. Like here in the United States, we have Western buckwheat and Eastern buckwheat, and people talk about how they're different. Well, they're actually different species, and so a lot of times the common names can be confusing too, or translating them over. So I really appreciate because I looked up, like, okay, what kind of tree is that even? It's very fascinating that the different and those are just those species that you are selling. I'm sure there are countless other species of floral sources that the bees are using down there that there is no English name or translation for them. It's just the local name and then whatever the Latin name is.
I mean, absolutely. For example, Angico Parapiptadenia rigida is a tree from Mimoside, the species, right? And the acacia, it's part of this family as well, the acacia species. And Parapiptadenia kind of like bridges in between. And then we were like, okay, we need to give a name to this honey that people can relate to. And then we dug a little bit and we said, okay, it is related to the acacia. I'm not going to call it acacia. I'm going to call it a Brazilian acacia.
Exactly, because it is in the legume family. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's just for the marmeleiro as well, the Brazilian quince. Marmeleiro is a name that the Brazilians in the countryside is kind of like a local slang, so to say, for that kind of plant. And for example, the quince paste that we eat with cheese and etc. is called marmelo, and it's made from quince, right? And this bush, this marmeleiro bush, it's very similar to the European quince bush. So the name is kind of, they call it the same basically. And I couldn't call it quince because it's not from the quince bush, so I had to call it Brazilian quince. And sometimes we have to clarify to people, but I think that for us it was very important to keep the native name, the original name as being the main name. And sometimes it is kind of complicated to say Aroeira, for example, but there are some other honeys that we intend to bring in the future that we will always keep the native name. Try to create this connection with the local of origin, right? Yeah.
AJ and I were just sitting here chatting in the background about the fact that we're listening really hard, but some of it's just going whoosh right over our heads because neither of us are beekeepers.
No, it's very fascinating. Even like the Brazilian quince too. That's it's in the family is Croton, and I'm like, I've heard of that, and it turns out it's in the United States it's commonly used. There's a little house plant that's a variegated house plant that people just put because it's hardy, and it turns out there's hundreds and hundreds of species of Croton, and I mean, who knew that? These plants do come from somewhere. I mean, they come from the tropics, and it turns out that some of them are very useful nectar sources for not just for bees, but for many different pollinators.
Yeah. And they grow this Croton sonderianus grows very fast. So It is used for reforestation areas and to plant like banks of rivers and things like that. It's a very useful plant in a very, very poor part of the country, northeast Brazil. It has beautiful beaches and etc. But as you go inland, it's this massive desert region that is 1.5 the size of Texas, and there's not much production, even like industry or agricultural production going on there. So we see it as probably the area in Brazil with the biggest potential for production of organic honey right now. And yeah, there's like so many varietals, and yeah, pretty interesting.
So of your three varietals that you have on your, which is your personal favorite and why? Of the different, I'm sure you like all of them. I mean, I like owl honeys too myself, but is there any, or maybe which is your favorite for certain things? Maybe I should ask that.
I like that question a little bit better because one of the things that we're trying to do, and we try to do that with our Instagram and things like that, is try to give ideas to people like, okay, what can you do with this honey that is better than if you use with that honey, right? I mean, I like basically every honey, and Larissa even like makes fun of me because she gives me a honey and she asks, what do you think? And I say, I like it. And she says, well, you like everything. So it's kind of hard to have you as a someone who can criticize anything. But anyhow, and I really like the Brazilian pink pepper Aroeira. It's a very interesting honey varietal, very special, to a certain extent, a rare honey varietal. And I think it pairs very well with, for example, strong, savory cheeses like blue cheese or a pecorino, or anything that has a strong taste, but also with a simple vanilla ice cream or strawberries and things like that.
Stop tempting me. I have a jar of that.
So, I mean, like, I really like this honey in that sense. Now, it goes very well with a chai as well, or I like my coffee just like black, I usually don't add anything, but if I'm having like a kind of a bad coffee, like burn flavor coffee, then I usually add some of that honey because it really comes through, right? Just like if you're using a buckwheat or an avocado honey, it comes through. It has this powerness. And I mean, it is my favorite varietal from all these honeys, the three varietals and the wildflower, right, that we have there. I really like our wildflower. El Silvestre is very similar to the honey that I grew up eating, and it has a certain bitterness, and that bitterness actually comes from one specific nectar source, the Bracatinga. I don't remember the scientific name right now, but anyhow, it's one of the main nectar sources in this region, and it's an extremely bitter honey, and you get a little bit of that in the Silvestre, and it's just, I don't know, it's just so complex and so aromatic, so flowery that I really like it. With manchego, for example, Spanish manchego cheese or the goat cheese, you can't go wrong. What else? As a sweetener for a green tea also. I mean, there's so many options, and I really like that one too. Our marmeleiro, I mean, the texture is fantastic. It's kind of, they all have basically the same water content. It's a very low water content in all those honeys. But marmeleiro is kind of, it has this thickness to it, this velvety consistency that it makes it very, very interesting. And Angelico is very delicate, right? It kind of has a gummy bear flavor, a kind of tropical fruitiness to it. But it's a much more delicate, very typical of acacia honey, right? Acacia honey, if you have a Hungarian acacia honey, is water white and super delicate, and I think that more in this area. I tend to go to more flavorful and powerful honeys in general.
as a mead maker, it's so intriguing to even think about what type of combinations, what type of mead you can make. I mean, obviously, just a traditional mead to allow the honey to shine through, so you can learn, because it's interesting how the honey and then the mead, after it's fermented, how they can be different, and it's difficult to explain that to people who, they've never had mead, they have not had a good dry mead, and they think, well, it doesn't taste like honey, and because the only taste they're looking for is sweetness, and it's like, but the sugar is fermented into alcohol, but all the aromatic compounds are still there, and all the other flavor compounds, and so it's really interesting to even think about how these would, how they would, go as a mead, but then combining it, like what kind of fruit or what kind of spices might I use? But I think just using them as a traditional to start with would be a wonderful way to go, because that's how if I have a new honey that I'm just trying to learn and trying to decide what I might do, use it with later on, I might just make it as a traditional mead, just to see how it tastes with the honey fermented and with the sugar fermented to the alcohol, and yet you still have all the flavor and aroma compounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that coming from the beer industry, I guess that to make the how should I put this? I always say that a good brewer, if they brew a good pilsner, if they brew a good lager where no off flavor can come through, because everything is so easy and so light that if there is something off, you can get it right away. So it's a very hard beer to brew, actually. And I guess
exactly.
this art of bringing the quality of the honey through all that fermentation that changes basically everything, that's a lot of science, but there's a lot of art in there too. And I personally, I brewed one batch of mead in my life many years ago. Didn't turn out good, and I never had time to do it again, unfortunately. So I'm looking forward to see what people can do with these honeys. I mean, as a brewer myself, or ex-brewer, should I say, or aspiring brewer at some point in the future, me and Larissa were very excited for this. So, yeah.
Well,
so you said your honeys are low moisture, and is this because I know some of them I see they're more of a desert arid area. Are they all from more of a dry arid area? Because I know that in some places it can be very hard to get the moisture content low enough for the honeys if it's in a humid climate. Even when the honey is capped, most of us beekeepers, we wait until the honey is capped before we extract it. But even I don't have this problem where I live, because I live in an arid climate myself. But I know in some parts of the world where it's very humid, it can be very difficult to get the honey dry enough, low enough moisture, so it's not going to be at risk of fermenting on its own. So are these honeys more
absolutely.
From dry climates? I know Brazil's a huge country, so and are they from different locations, or
the
time of year they tend to harvest the honey, or?
Let me start like this. Marmeleiro, for example, comes from the northeast, which is a very dry area. They have one main rainy season that starts. Hello.
Yeah, you're still here.
I'm still here, right? Okay, so there we go. So Marmeleiro comes from a deserty region. It is characterized as a desert because the precipitation along the years is very little, but they have one main rainy season around January and February, and it's very short. So Marmeleiro is the first plant to bloom. So beekeepers have a little, very short time window to harvest this honey, but it is a more dry place. Aroeira also comes from a more drier place, and both Silvestre and Angico, they come from the south of Brazil, from my state, Paraná. It is more humid in the summer, but the rain season usually starts around December, and these honeys are harvested more beginning of November, end of November. November is the main month there for the harvest of these honeys, and so it's not that humid yet. But nonetheless, I cannot tell you, honestly, exactly why They all have very similar water contents. But what we know from Enrique is that the beekeepers that he trains and that he works with, they are all well trained to only harvest honey when, for example, the frame is 75-80% completely, covered or whatever the number is. I don't remember on top of my head now. And so he's very particular when it comes to the ripeness of the honey, even because you're not allowed to bring honey into the U.S. if you have more than 18.5% water content. That's the requirement from I think that's the USDA grade A or something from the FDA. And so, yeah, but they come from very, very different regions. And this is the fun thing, right? You can get honey from so many different places, and it's just honey.
Wow, that makes me want to go visit. One of my dreams, if I ever won the lottery, which I never will because I don't actually play the lottery, but if I ever won the lottery,
there you go.
I would travel around the world, and I would go see beekeepers around the world, all over, watch, and not just watching them, but actually be there helping them and seeing what they're doing, and because it's so interesting, this amazing little insect that we work with, but it's different, but it's the same in different parts of the world. And I don't know, most beekeepers are just good people. I guess, to be outside when it's hot and by yourself and among these little insects that sometimes, want to sting you, it takes a certain type of personality to be willing to do that. But yeah, that sounds really interesting. I have some, you try to imagine what such a big place that as Brazil is, and I realize that, there's such a diverse country with, diverse ecosystems. It's just hard to imagine.
Yeah, so the interesting thing, for example, where Marmeleiro comes from, Caatinga, that biome is the only 100% Brazilian biome, so you don't find that anywhere else in the world. So you have a lot of endemic plants and species that you cannot have this kind of honey coming from anywhere else. It's not like, for example, the acacia in Europe, where you can get it from Germany, or you can get it from Romania or Italy. Is the same species of acacia. In Brazil, you have this area there, this biome, this region, the Caatinga, which is just very interesting within its own characteristics and etc. You have the Cerrado where Aroeira comes from. That's basically the birthplace of all the waters in Brazil. I've never been there myself, to be honest, but it's this massive region, super threatened by agriculture, and everything is being cleared for pasture and soybeans and coal or whatever it is. And then in South Brazil, Mexico coming from this more lower altitude Atlantic rainforest, so to say, very rich soil, lot of agriculture in areas more to the north. And one thing actually that is very interesting about Mexico, if you guys don't mind, just so I can tell this story, is that these trees, they are protected, right? They're protected by the government. And what happened is a lot of these areas where this honey comes from, they were cleared for pasture. And these trees, they could not be cut down. So you have these trees, they are massive trees that also they provide a lot of shade for cattle and for the ranchers and for everything, right? So they're very important trees. But if you have hives around,
did we lose?
For single varietal
there you
honey,
are. We
because
lost you for a second
when
there.
So there is this point which is very interesting, and I didn't know about that. Enrique explained that to us. And whereas Silvestre comes from a super high altitude Atlantic rainforest, a very old forest, untouched, still protected, and Yeah, the places there are just incredibly remote too. So, I mean, you said if you could like win the lottery and travel the world and meeting beekeepers and working with them and different honeys, we feel the same way. But we also can play the lottery and then we say, you know what, let's start a business and see if this business can help us do this, right?
I write it off as a business
so
expense.
that's the idea.
Yeah. Seriously, I do. I mean, I work with the AMMA, which has to do with mead and honey. I run Got Mead, which has to do with mead and honey, and those are my jobs. And so the trip to Australia, I brought back honey and mead to have a tasting session at the MeadCon in 2019. So I'm writing off all of my expenses for that trip, except for personal purchases, But
Of course.
Yeah, and I got the flight for free with points, so I lucked out there. But all the camping costs and meals and whatnot, I'm writing off. And I'm going to do the same thing when I go to Poland next year for the European Mead conference. And they wanted me to come this year, but I can't really swing it just in cash in hand. Two big trips in 1 year. But I take it as a tax write-off. Because it's research, it's development, it's expansion of mead in the world, and that's part of my job.
Yeah, no, you have a wonderful job. I mean,
yeah,
the
pay is not fantastic.
Honestly.
The pay is not great, but the perks are amazing.
Perks make up for it.
Right,
so, yeah, I'm fortunate that my husband has a good job that I can get away with this kind of crap. But if I had to if it was just me and I had to actually make a decent living, I probably couldn't get away with half the stuff I do. But I'm sucking up all of this because AJ and I, neither of us are beekeepers, so a lot of what you guys are talking about is new to us, and it's really cool to hear this. With all of this stuff. And I'm curious because have you got USDA organic certification for the honeys?
Yeah, we have the seal there, and I mean, to be very honest with you, USDA does not have guidelines for organic beekeeping. They never established anything.
Yeah, isn't it kind of sad?
I find it just weird. I cannot wrap my head around it and understand why this was never done. If there's a lack of interest, I really don't know.
Probably it was politics. I would probably guess it would be politics. Because as it stands right now, you can get the USD label for honey in the United States, but it says right under if you go to even the USDA website, it says, but they have not actually come up with specific formal guidelines. So it says something very general. So if a producer uses the normal production and processing of organic, then you can use the label, but we actually haven't come up with guidelines yet, which that's kind of concerning because, I mean, theoretically somebody could get that label and put it on there, and it doesn't mean that it really even is what people might think it is.
That is really interesting because somebody had asked about that on one of the sale posts that we made for your honeys, Thomas, and they were like, well, how could they possibly be USDA organic? And I said, I don't know, we'll ask, because I have no idea how that works, But that's really cool. But from what you're saying, though, even though they don't have guidelines, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, where the honey is being is being gathered and harvested by the bees is fairly remote, the areas that you're working with. So we're not talking there's a lot of, or any maybe, commercial agriculture going on in the area. Is that correct?
Yes, in these areas there is no commercial agriculture going on, and and it's not only about the location of these hives or of the hives, but it's also about bee management practices of artificial feeding, use of antibiotics is not allowed. For example, they are allowed to use some kind of homeopathic things, but following European guidelines in this case. This is what Henrique does. He sells honey to Europe, and he follows European guidelines. So there is a German company actually who does all the certification and they go there and they do, they check the hives, if they are painted or not, if there is any kind of plastic or not. And, every time that you remove a frame, everything needs to be documented. If you move hives, they need to get an okay from the certification agent. So you see how much bureaucracy and how much paperwork is involved in this kind of stuff that I understand that there's a lot. I mean, being a beekeeper is not easy. It's hard work. And if you still have to deal with a bunch of paperwork on top of that, it can be kind of like complicated. And also, for example...
He does have the European Union Association organic certification then?
Yeah, it's what they call the bio, right? The bio seal is the bio, right? The green one with the little leaf with the stars and stuff.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, they're much more stringent. They have very specific guidelines, like you were mentioning.
Very, very specific, and we actually, organic is non-GMO, right? I mean, it needs to be non-GMO in order to be organic, and we never really cared for the non-GMO seal and etc. But this year we just decided to go after it, and we actually just got the okay from Food Chain ID to have the seal on the packaging saying that it's non-GMO verified and etc. Even though already was, because we passed everything obviously, and so this is yet another seal, But
do you have your honeys tested for sometimes honeys will be tested for adulteration, like antibiotics and stuff like that, but also, and obviously the beekeeper is going to be monitoring moisture, but I'm talking like for pollen analysis.
Yes. Yeah.
They check for other things. I think the European Union checks for like HMF, different sugars, so they test for that too.
Absolutely, and this is one of the main things what makes it sometimes difficult to sell honey to European Union is the HMF, but it is a wonderful indicator of how this honey has been processed and handled. And so HMF is one of them, pollen analysis, and foreign sugars.
So just let me to explain to our audience, and HMF is hydroxymethylfurfural, and it's a compound that actually can develop naturally in honey over a long period of time, but it can develop slow or quickly if the honey has been heated at a high temperature. So what they were looking was the honey pasteurized. So it can be a problem, though, if you're producing in a warm climate or a tropical climate, because sometimes the HMF levels can be naturally higher just because it's a warmer climate than Europe or North America. So I can see how that can be a little challenge. But the reason why they monitor for all of these things is I'll get into it now, because a couple of the questions were asked of us is honey is one of the most adulterated food substances there is. And unfortunately, there's honey being, from China, and then, the United States said, well, we're not going to have Chinese honey. So then all of a sudden, these other countries that didn't produce hardly any honey are producing like 1,000 times more honey a year later. Well, it wasn't probably being produced. It was being shipped through another country.
Well,
and so the way, and it's a real.
I'm sorry, I heard
it's a real
Brazil
cat and mouse game. So. Well, and it has been through some of those countries. I mean, any way they could take it through. But the way that they would tell is they would look at pollen analysis, and if there's a honey coming in from, well, I don't know where, that supposedly is coming from South America, but it has only Asian pollen in there, that doesn't work. So what they've done is they've ultra filtered these honeys. I'm talking about these ones that are trying to get this adulterated honey onto the market, and they ultra filter them so there's no pollen, and they cannot track the origins. So there's other ways they go through chemically to analyze, what is the actual source of this. And also the other trick or what have you that some of the honey adulterers will do is they've learned they can feed their bees, corn syrup, or they can just mix the corn syrup in the barrel a little bit and dilute it, and do what, 10%, 20%, whatever. Corn syrup's a lot cheaper than honey, and they can sell it and as quote unquote honey when it's not honey at all. And there's so much of a volume being imported to the United States that it's easy for it to slip in. So that's why a lot of customers or buyers of honey are very worried. What they are getting and buying, is it really truly honey? So this is really good what you're telling me, that you've gone through that. That your beekeepers have gone through that process of all that paperwork and making sure that it's monitored and tested for, not just HMF and pollen, but all these other things too.
Yeah, no, and it has to be. This is the only way. There is no other option if we want our industry to evolve in a healthy way and protect also our beekeepers. Our domestic beekeepers, because and another point that is very interesting. You were talking about presence of foreign sugars in honey. A bad artificial feeding method, badly done, so poorly done, so to say. If you feed your bees artificially for too long or too close to, for example, the nectar flow, then this sugar can end up in the final honey. So, I mean, you do NMR analysis, or you do a chromatography or mass spectrometer or whatever you're running, and you're going to find these foreign sugars. And these foreign sugars, they were not added to the final honey, but bees fed on these, dextrose syrups or whatever it is, and they process that as if they were processing nectar, and you find that in final honey. And this is something very, very common, actually. And I suppose that it happens a lot because of lack of knowledge, right?
Yes.
Beekeepers lose.
On one of the beekeeping forums last year, a new beekeeper was posting, "We've got such wonderful light honey. What kind of flower is it from?" And then later down, she said how they were feeding them sugar syrup like all summer long, and it's like, that's not honey, that's just sugar. They didn't know. But sometimes it might be done by somebody who, maybe they're lazy, they fed them, and now the nectar flow started, and they didn't, separate the boxes and combs that may have had that in there, or maybe they didn't care. Or it could be somebody that's devious too. I mean, there are people out there that will do anything for a buck, and unfortunately there are individuals like that.
And sugar's cheap.
Yeah, sugar is a lot cheaper than honey. And this is the problem too, is for a lot of beekeepers, they've really struggled. And I know here in the United States, but it's like this all over the world, where they bring in a cheap honey that's not really a honey. We call it funny honey here. It's contaminated with corn fructose or high fructose corn syrup, and then they can sell it for a lot cheaper. And so if you are a beekeeper who's doing an ethical job and you're making sure your honey is not being contaminated, not just with even sugars but other things too, and you try to sell it, it's going to be maybe more expensive because you're being, you're taking more time and you're being more careful, and you can't sell it for what you are actually making it for. And that's why in the United States, most commercial beekeepers, the beekeepers who do it for a living, they don't make their living from honey production. It's more from commercial pollination, because there's more money to be made in sending your bees, over to California to pollinate the almonds or whatnot. But there's a trade-off. The bees it's stressful to put them on a truck and ship them across the country. Yeah. They get exposed to, pesticides and fungicides. There's when you put a whole bunch of beehives in one valley, in the Central Valley in California, there's going to be viruses and things being spread. That's maybe not so good for the bees either. And I mean, I know my friends who are commercial beekeepers. I mean, they'd rather not have to do that, but that's where the money is to be made. And to try to just make a living selling only honey, it is very difficult in many of the more developed countries. Yeah, but I know in Brazil that they don't do a lot of, they don't really do much commercial pollination, or maybe not very much at all, is my understanding of beekeeping. I mean, I would assume maybe they are doing some, but it's not such a big thing like it is here in the United States.
No, and I mean the money that is made in commercial pollination in Brazil is so little that is ridiculous. I mean, it's very little.
But that's actually kind of good for the quality of the honey, actually, in a way, because the honey.
Exactly. No, exactly.
And it's probably good for the bees too.
Yeah. For example, one thing that Breyer was telling us is for some crops like oranges, for example, beekeepers, and I don't know how it is in the U.S., so just out of curiosity, but the beekeepers actually have to pay for the orchard owners to bring their hives to pollinate the oranges and have orange blossom honey, and not the other way around, because it is a honey that fetches a higher price in some markets, and beekeepers actually have to pay to bring their bees there, and not the other way around.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's the other way around.
What beekeepers do in Brazil, some beekeepers do, especially in the northeast, because it is a more tough environment, I would say. Instead of doing migratory beekeeping for the sake of pollinating crops, they are chasing the flowers, right? So they're bringing these bees, like from this meadow to that meadow to this forest and this forest. And this is something that happens. It's not very common, though. But this is the extent of migratory beekeeping in Brazil. But I mean, let's keep in mind that there are probably some commercial pollination operations that I don't know of. So, yeah. But the orange orchard issue was pretty interesting.
And the other advantage you have, as I already mentioned, the Africanized bees are much more resistant to this one parasite that came in that the European honeybees were not adapted to. They came in from another species altogether, the Asian honeybee, and it's called the varroa mite. It's really decimated beekeeping in both Europe and the United States. It hasn't come to Australia yet, although I have friends in Australia who are, they're very grateful to be, varroa mite free for now, but it's come to New Zealand, so who knows? But the Africanized bees, one of their advantages is they're kind of resistant to it, and it's maybe because of their behavior. They swarm a lot. They're a little bit more hygienic. They clean out and then the varroa mite itself doesn't reproduce as well. They don't fully understand how they're more resistant, but they are. And so that's one advantage. They don't have to worry. It's like using chemicals to treat them. And myself, I use organic chemicals, so it's not like I'm using anything that's going to get in the honey or the wax. And from that standpoint, if I wanted to be organic, I wouldn't have to worry about it. But it's not like they even have to make a choice about that. It's like their bees are resistant to that. And then some of the diseases where they would use antibiotics, which is the foul brood, a lot of beekeepers will use antibiotics like tetracycline, and there's a whole bunch of them to kind of suppress that or to treat that. But apparently there's not really any American foul brood in Brazil, which is pretty amazing, and that's a pretty good thing. And I'm not sure if it's because the Africanized bees are more resistant, or maybe it's just because it hasn't got there, or because of the climate, or who knows. But so they don't really even have to have the question of, do I have to use this treatment, this veterinary treatment for the bees that maybe is not going to be fitting with an organic certification? It's like they just don't even need to do it, and that's really very fortunate for them. Whereas in other countries, it's like, well, my bees have this disease and I want to treat it, but I don't want to lose my organic certification. And so what do I do? And I can try these natural approaches, but they may not work. And they're very fortunate that they don't have to be worrying about these questions.
Yeah, and it is interesting. You're talking about beekeeping in Europe. I just came back from Germany, and the organic movement in food in general in Europe is a different level. I mean, it's very nice what's going on there. I mean, prices are still high, right? Unfortunately, just a part of the population has let me put like financial access to organic foods in general, but I mean, the amount of organic honey varietals that you see around supermarkets, local honey varietals, right? And not only varietals, but some wildflower honeys from specific regions. And I mean, the work that is done there, the way that people see honey and treat honey with more respect, the prices can be a little bit higher, and so beekeepers can make a better living focusing on the quality of the honey, the quality of the bees, instead of the quantity of the bees necessary to pollinate crops. And this is something very interesting. And I'm not very familiar with how is the situation, beekeeping situation in Europe concerning diseases and etc. But there seems to be a lot of very good organic honey being produced there, especially in Germany and Italy and France as well, but more Germany and Italy.
Well, it's kind of like that. The slow food movement, started in Europe, and there's a lot of people here in the United States that really appreciate, high quality food, whether it's organic or conventional raised or ethically raised or whatever. But it's so interesting because I've had, I try to sell honey, and I don't really try to sell a lot of it because I have more than enough use for it myself, and then of course I have plenty of friends that it's pretty much spoken for. If I have any extra honey, they want it. It's like people say, "Do you sell honey?" And I'm like, "It's already spoken for." But I've had some people say, they would balk at the price, or they'd be like, "Oh, well, I can buy it cheaper at whatever big box store," and I'm like, "Well, go for it then," and of course they're probably getting corn syrup or who knows what. But it's interesting how in the United States, at least, for a lot of people, honey is almost a commodity. It's no more valuable than buying table sugar or bread. And I'm not talking about artisanal cooked, big bread, but I'm talking about like white bread. Something that's just like we don't really care where it's from. We don't really care what it's about, and it's all the same and it's all interchangeable, like a commodity. And I know, and I feel obviously strongly the opposite of that. And I know, in Europe that they have a greater appreciation for something that's local. You might be raising something here that you can't get out of this town or this one little valley, and people have a lot of pride in their locally grown or locally produced foods and crops. And hopefully we can get a little bit more of that here in the United States. Even talking to mead makers, everybody wants to get their, whatever unique varietal of honey, and whether it's meadow foam or tupelo. But I'm like, why don't you just use some of the local honey from your beekeeper down the road? Use a nice local wildflower. It's going to be like nothing else that you can get anywhere else. And not that I don't appreciate all those honeys from all over. Of course I do. But just having that terroir of the honey in a way, that the local that you're getting that no one else really can get.
Mm-hmm. And appreciating those very tiny, and sometimes big, but usually tiny differences, delicate differences between honeys from here and there. This is just exciting, and it's just, and should be, I think it opens people's minds, and to be honest, this is our main goal with our project is to, tell people we get so many people trying to say, like, I had no idea that honey could taste like this, and you say, well,
exactly.
It tastes like many different things. So buy the honey from the local beekeeper, buy the honey from the guy that produces honey in the next valley or the next city or whatever. And try like different honeys, and you're going to open your mind. You're going to be, wanting to spend less money in cheap honey and saving more money and buy something a little bit better and cooking with it or using it as an ingredient or topping something, doing something a little bit more interesting. And instead of just like you said, treating it like a commodity, but it's a long process, educational process, but we have a lot of fun doing it, and we see a movement, and that's important.
I think that's really great that's
so
happening.
Somebody asked, are you thinking of ever expanding beyond Brazil? I mean, of course you have a very strong connection, but are you thinking about expanding to any other countries or sourcing from other places outside of Brazil?
Yeah, absolutely. We started obviously with Brazil because of the connection and because we can grow a lot with this partner and learn as well. But we do know good beekeepers and people from other countries where we can get certified organic honeys. And it's just that it takes time. It is a slow process, but we have our eyes in a couple places. I'm going to leave it as a surprise for the future. But we obviously, the varietals that we have and will offer, they will always be unique. They will always have something special about it. We want to really tell a story behind this honey, and why did we choose this? It's not difficult to buy organic honey varietals on the market, from importers or whatever. But to find these specific honeys that have a story to tell, that's not easy. That's hard. And to find someone that you can trust and that wants to grow with you and talk about the same things that you want to talk about, that's not very easy. It's a handful of people around the world, and we want to grow this community. And we will expand. We will expand to some other countries, but for now, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm sorry. I can't be much more specific now, but
we understand. We look forward to seeing where that's gonna go.
Yeah, we look forward to. We have some varietals in mind. We have some honeys that we already tried, that we already have a relationship with some people. So we have our minds set in some places, in some areas, in some specific honeys. But it's nothing 100% yet. Soon enough.
Soon enough. Well, I sure know that everybody's really excited about the deal that you did for the MMA members. It's really a really great thing. I know we really appreciate honey, and we appreciate access to unique honey, and we also appreciate being part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, we couldn't be more grateful to you guys for making this possible, right? Because doing this connection to all I would say the consumers, people that are consuming this honey, to do something with it. It's not something easy to do, and this is something that it's Vicky. I mean, you guys, you do such an amazing job. It's very nice, and we are we're newcomers here. We don't know how things work, and you guys took us with open arms and say, hey, there's something interesting. People are interested. Let's see what we can do with this. And I mean, shout out to Bob Flanzy as well. He is an amazing person that has been helping us understand a few things and reach out to some people and make this thing happen. So thank you very much. We're very excited and very grateful.
Well, I know there's at least 2 commercial meaderies using your honey to do batches, and I don't even know how many home mead makers that are fixing to buy mead from you guys or honey from you guys. So that's pretty awesome, and I love that you're willing to do that. I mean, I absolutely am in love with the pink peppercorn, and I've got to go look at numbers and see if I can swing some of that because I really want some. I got a little jar. I really need more.
And I think that, I don't know if that went out with all the information, but we are very small. We have our retail products, we have our varietal set, and we have the individual jars, and we pack them. We keep our honey raw in drums, of course, and we just strain them to put into the jars, and we do that seasonally. We don't overpack or overfill jars. So that's why we decided to do this kind of like a pre-order kind of thing, where once we know more or less in this next week or 1.5 weeks how much honey we have to pack, then we're gonna have all these pails freshly filled for delivery. But we are packing all of this now at the last week of September, and all the honey will be shipped during the first and second week of October. So this honey in pails is not available right now, but it is available in drums, not in the buckets. So this will happen at the end of the month now. So I don't think that information went out very clearly, but I've been telling everyone that contact us, and people have been very understanding, it's been very cool.
Yeah, I've been letting them know to contact you guys via email or phone to, to find out the details and go ahead and place their orders. So I wasn't here when the email went out, or at least I take that back. I was in town, but that got sent out not by me, so I don't know what went out. But we can definitely send out an update saying, oh hey, by the way, for this sale, this is what's going to happen.
It's not a big deal. I have an automatic answer already going out, so it's everything is good. And yeah, it's once again, it's just me and Larissa. It's just the two of us doing this. So I apologize if it takes there like 1, maybe 2 days for an answer to come, but we're definitely reading all the emails and listening to all voicemails. And we are actually at the Natural Products Expo East in Baltimore now for this week.
Cool.
We have a little booth and on the Organic Pavilion. And so we are very, very busy during the day. But as soon as we get home at the end of the day, we go over all the emails and voicemails or whatnot and try to answer and respond to all the inquiries.
Fabulous. That's so cool that you're doing a show there. I wondered why you were hanging out in Baltimore for 5 days.
With this beautiful weather. I mean, I was just seeing the rain. Well, in Arizona, you don't get much of that.
I'll go through my list and find out. I know, I told you about Charm City, which is right there in Baltimore. But
yeah.
I know there's a couple of other meaderies in the general area, like within an hour or so of that area. So I'll look over my list and I'll email you the whatever else I come up with, so that if you decide you want to go meadery hunting, you can do that.
Oh, I would love to do that. I don't know if I'm going to have time to go out of Baltimore, but
I know. I know what it's like when you're doing a show. You don't really get out of the hotel much, so.
No, and the way the weather is coming, I'm probably going to get out of the place and run to the hotel. There's many other places that I would like to go. And we drove a little bit. It's actually not a hotel. It's a small Airbnb room.
Oh,
but
cool.
we drove a little bit around the city, and I mean it's so pretty. It's so nice. It's so it has this old charm that you don't see in the West. Right? Everything is kind of like new built there, and here it's kind of like old and has this kind of feeling that it's pretty nice. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, Baltimore's been around a long time, so it's it's got a lot going for it in the age department in a country where if it's more than 25 years old, we knock it down and build a parking lot.
I was in Baltimore a few weeks ago for a meeting of my own, and usually I just look, is there any meaderies nearby? And usually there isn't, and I'm always bummed. And I look, oh my gosh, there's one like 15 minutes from the hotel. So I was very fortunate. I got an Uber, and I totally surprised them too. It was one of those random things. I'm like, well, I didn't want anybody to feel bad that I was coming, and then they couldn't make. So I just walked in the door smiling, and it was pretty awesome. I got to spend a couple of hours there, and they make some really great mead. I brought a bunch back, and my wife and I are still enjoying it. But
nice.
It's a really neat place and great people, and
it is, yeah. And
if you get a chance to visit, I recommend it.
I love the way they use the botanicals.
Yes.
They've got an almost gin-like approach. Not that the mead tastes like gin, because it doesn't, but gin people, and this is forefront in my mind because I went to a gin distillery when I was in Australia. And I'd never been to a gin distillery before, so I guess I never thought about it. But they're heavy into the whole botanical thing, and James and his and his people, they work so heavily with the botanicals, and they combine things that you think, I don't know, and then you taste it and you're like, wow, that really works.
It was so funny when I just walked in there smiling. I'm like, well, is anybody here that's going to know me? Of course, James recognized me right off the bat.
Well, yeah, he's met you.
He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like,
it's a long way from South Dakota.
Like, well, I decided it about 20 minutes ago, so I didn't have time. But I like their meat because it's also not all sweet. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for sweetness, but I also like dry, and I like session style, and it was a really refreshing. both literally and figuratively, to have, a meadery that's making these mead styles that, we don't see always as much. And I mean, they have some really good stuff. I really enjoyed it.
That's the thing too. I mean, he and Cellarman's were two of the ones that were kind of instrumental in really getting me to seriously look at dry meads and off-dry meads and say, wow, this really can be good, because I've had so many bad dry and off-dry meads.
I know.
And
as have I as well.
Yeah, and it's sad.
Yeah,
because
as I have as well.
when they're done well, they're amazing. And I mean, I've gotten I've been the same way about wine, because I mean, my daughter is like a total. It's all cabs and merlots with her, and I'm like, like 80% of the merlots in the market are crap, and probably 75% of the cabs are crap, and so I just don't drink them because I don't know if I can get a good one. I like it when they're good.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a wine drinker, I prefer dry wines, and so the same thing with mead. I tend to prefer dry or off dry. Even though, ironically, most of the metals I win is from my sweet and semi-sweet stuff. Go figure that. But, well, I just keep that dry for myself to enjoy.
Oh, that's why. That's why you're not winning metals with it. You're keeping it at home and drinking it.
Hoarding it.
What do you think is the biggest issue with brewing a drier mead and making it balanced and tasting good?
Well,
I think it's really hard to hide behind any flaws. Number one, if there's any flaw, it's going to be obvious. Yeah, it'll be right there in your face. It's not like you're not putting spices or fruit in there. You're not covering it up, smoothing it up with sugar or whatnot. So, I mean, it's really showing the skill of the artistry of the mead maker themselves.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to make it really well done.
It is, yeah. Pete Bokalich's mantra has always been, you should start when you learn to make mead. You should start with the traditional and do it till you get it right. Then everything else is easy. Because
exactly.
Traditional is, well, it's the basis of everything else that we do. And if you can't make a good traditional, then basically what you're saying is everything else you do is kind of hiding the fact that you can't make a good traditional. And, and I know that people are going to come like after me about that, but I'm serious. I mean, part of the reason that I've not made a lot of traditionals is because I'm worried about my ability to make it really well. And given the background that I have and how many meads I've tasted and how many really good meads I've tasted and really bad ones, I'm terrified that any traditional mead that I make isn't going to live up to my own standards, much less those of the people who I respect the most. And so I don't make a lot of them because it's like, they're not good enough. I'm like my own worst critic. And that's the thing. And I think that's why a lot of other people avoid them too, because it's terrifying. Honey's not cheap.
No, it's not.
Well, unless you're Tom or Thomas and you have it your own honey, but that's different. The rest of us have to buy it,
But I make a lot of mead from other honeys that I don't grow, because it would get boring. Not that I don't have good honey, and I'm very proud of it, but you get kind of bored of using the same ingredient. It's nice to try different things.
Yeah, that's true.
No.
So I'm not quite the honey hoarder that Carvin is. Carvin is quite the honey hoarder, but
yeah, he is a honey hoarder.
Maybe someday I'll work up.
We all want to be Carvin when we grow up, for as far as honey cakes.
Carvin has.
I don't have enough space.
Honey.
Yeah, didn't Carvin
I'm sure
buy
he does.
didn't Carvin buy some 5-gallon pails from you guys, Thomas?
Yeah, Carvin, if you're listening to this, I need you to tell me how things are going. I didn't answer my email.
It's hard to pin Carvin down. The man never stops moving. Near as I can tell, I don't even think he sleeps. Yeah. He's just the busiest person I have ever met. I mean, he's got so much going on in his life, and yet manages to accomplish so much. I want to be Carvin when I grow up.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, I will let him know that you're wanting to know how they turned out. He did say something when the sale, when we put up the sale thing, the MMA put up the sale thing for your honey. He came back and commentated on what he got and how it was working out. I think it was on the thread in the AMMA group.
Yeah, I'm terrible in following. I'm just terrible following forums or the group or etc. I think I'm part of the Facebook group and everything, but I'm just so bad with that. And yeah. Cool, guys. Yeah, no, this was fun. This was really fun. This was my first time doing this, and I had
and you
a very
survived
good
and
time.
everything.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
It wasn't painful.
And I just have to tell you, I know a lot of people are very excited about your honey. I've talked with a lot of my friends who've gotten some of your honey, and everybody's very excited.
Yeah, no, thank you for the kind words. And I mean, one last comment that I would like to make is that, you know, me and Larissa, we would feel very accomplished if we could bring this project into the U.S. in the future and work with beekeepers here and offer some incredible honeys and, you know, feature sustainably harvested, sustainably produced honeys. And even if we have to start something from scratch, you know, and in regards to all the organic part of it, you know, this is something that would be like a dream come true for us. And yeah, you know, because we have so much potential here, so much potential. There's so many good people, so many good places, amazing places in this country, and that we can help to protect if we can show that we can generate sustainable and clean income from those places. And we truly believe that this is something that can be done, and especially in the U.S. So, yeah, I mean, we're fully on board to do whatever we can to help this industry grow in a mean way, so to say, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Thomas, you and Tom need to connect offline, because Tom is a huge advocate for the American beekeeping and honey producing people. You know, I mean,
Absolutely.
He teaches all over the country.
Absolutely.
And
so many beekeepers are they're so it's I hear this story so many times. You know, I produce this wonderful product and they just want to take it to a big honey packing plant and just make it into, you know, whatever, or honey nut cereal or salad dressing, and or, you know, for baking or something. And you know, we're getting back to the commodity part of it, and it's just really sad. You know, a lot of these are multi-generational families of beekeepers. You know, and they've been doing it for generations, and they produce a wonderful product that's very unique. But they have to make a living also, so they have to do things that, you know, they would prefer not to do. But they have to make a living. You know, they have to pay their bills. And it's really unfortunate when, you know, you hear these stories multiple, you know, from around the United States. But you know, they're doing what their options are right now.
Yeah. So let's, you know, we're going to work hard, and I mean, having a seasonal United States edition would be something very, very special. It would be very special.
All right, Tom, you got a new mission.
Well, this is set since the very beginning, and yeah, we're working towards it. But yeah, I mean, I would love to connect with you guys offline and keep in touch. And, you know, sometimes we get like some interesting material that we can share. And, you know, I mean, I'm new to this industry as well, right? So I have tons of questions. So, and I'm not afraid to ask and to say that I don't know everything, right? I'm not a beekeeper myself, so, you know, there's so much that we need to learn, and we really appreciate anyone who's willing to share their knowledge and their experiences. I think that's the only way that we can grow, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you definitely need to hook up with Tom, because he knows all the people and he's got all the contacts.
Oh, I don't know all the people. I know just a few of the people.
Yeah,
But yeah.
But if you know the people who know the people.
Yeah, right.
I know people who know the people, though.
Right,
Yeah, there you
exactly.
go.
That's the thing. You've got connections, Tom. That's the thing. Certainly more than the rest of us have. So, I mean, we come at honey from a totally different perspective, whereas, you a honey man. So. But yeah, I think there's some definite possibilities here. And I mean, Thomas, one of the things that really struck me about what I saw on your website was what you were saying about how there were seasonal honeys on the shelves in Europe, from other countries all over the world. And that, and I think about that, and I think of all the places I've been in the States where I've looked at honey in the shops, and I never see or rarely see honeys from other places outside the U.S. ever. Depending on where I'm at, occasionally you might see something from Mexico or Canada, but rarely from a country that does not abut the United States. It's just not, that just doesn't happen. So I find that fascinating because I'm learning a lot more about honey now that I've been to Australia. Next year I'm going to Europe, I hope, if everything works out. So I'm going to get to try some of the honeys there. So I'm learning a lot, and my horizons are expanding, and I'm becoming a lot more aware of what we don't have here and how can we make that happen. That's important, I think.
Yeah. I think that it expands your horizons, right, and shows you that it's much more than just what we have here in our backyards, and flavors that you don't get here. I mean, and that's totally normal. I mean, you don't get a good blueberry honey in Brazil. You don't get a raspberry honey in Brazil. Buckwheat honey. You don't get that in Brazil as well. So those kinds of things are interesting if you have access to them in other places. It shows you and creates more interest and more respect for the product, I think. So yeah, you mentioned that you don't see a lot of products from other countries on the shelf. And if you go to a big retail chain, you find the organic honey there. It's always a blend from different countries, right? Mainly from Brazil in this case, I guess. So, the way that we're trying to portray and bring this honey to these honeys to the market is a little bit different. So yeah, let's see what is the feedback from consumers and see if we can create this interest. I know that in Europe it exists, and you can find a few honey varietals from Europe in the U.S., but they're not readily available everywhere. And they're usually kind of expensive too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, well, heck, even any kind of varietal or I guess you'd say artisan honey, so not mass-produced kind of honey that you see in shops in the States tends to be extremely pricey. I mean, just really, really spendy and yeah, just more than I usually want to spend. Although, being that I'm a honey nut, I tend to buy little jars that my girlfriend Bree uses in her chai. I have jars of honey everywhere. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and something that I think it's interesting is that sometimes you find labels saying that it's a special honey or etc. And then you buy that honey, you spend money, and you buy that honey, you bring it home and you try it, and a lot of times, I mean, how many times this has happened to us already? The honey is not what it says it is, or it is something, it's diluted, or it says that it is something, and then you get like the strong, let's say, eucalyptus taste from it, and they say, well, I know that this is eucalyptus, I mean, and then, and this is something that is hard because for someone that has a little bit of more of a refined palate, and refined in the sense that has tried quite a bunch of different honeys, it is disappointing because you spend money and you buy something and it's not what it says it is, or it's something that could be anything else. It's not very unique and special. So this is what we want to try to do. Just unique stuff. There's a lot of good honey out there, but there's only a few very unique honeys out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've basically adopted the approach of if I can't taste it before I buy it, I won't buy it.
That's a very good approach. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's what I went to three different honey farms in Australia and got to taste all of the honeys that I ended up purchasing. Well, actually, I wanted to purchase a lot more of the honeys, but budget and all that. So,
you wanted to purchase all of the honeys.
All of the honeys, yeah, I did.
All of the honeys.
All of the honeys. But I ended up coming home with like 20 different honeys, which was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Can't wait to share them with everybody next March at the MeadCon, because I have to work out the logistics of that whole thing.
You don't have the honeys here. You have the honeys there.
Oh no, I have the honeys here. The honeys are in my home, but I have to work out the logistics of how I'm gonna do the tasting, and I'm gonna have to. I mean, I don't have enough to like give 100 people a tasting, if you see what I'm saying. So it's gonna be a limited session, probably in like a suite or something. I'm gonna see if maybe I can get Carvin to loan me a suite or something for an hour to have it for a limited number of people, like maybe 20 or 30 people, something like that. But I got to talk to my conference committee and see if we can squeeze that in somewhere. So. But I really want people to taste this because, Tom, you had mentioned this earlier. Australia has not yet got the varroa mite, and even though it's reached New Zealand, one of the things I saw when I was in Australia, both on mainland Australia, i.e. the bigger island, and then Kangaroo Island, which is a smaller island off the southwest coast, was the rather draconian measures they take to protect their bees and their honey.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're not messing around there. And I was really impressed with that, because they're working really hard. Even the Kangaroo Island bees, which I thought was really interesting. When we got out there, Kangaroo Island is it's like 20 kilometers long and about 4 kilometers wide, so not huge, but big enough.
Is this where they have the original Italian bees? Is that the one, or am I thinking of something else?
Yes, that's the place.
Okay,
I'm place outside
they actually
Italy
probably are more pure than the Italian bees in Italy, actually.
They
yes,
are
very
at this
interesting.
point. Yeah, they haven't been Europeanized at all. And so they're really, you ought to see the notices they have at the ferry docks, because the only way you can get to the island is via ferry. And so all the ferry docks say, here's a list of all the stuff you cannot take on the island. And they're like, if you have any honey, blah, 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 blah. And so I had some sealed up stuff, but it was all back at Hamish's house, so none of that came with me to Kangaroo Island. But it was really neat because they had all of this, this is a biosphere and we're protecting it. And, and we're making sure that this is not going to be sullied in any way. And they were like, and if we catch you, really bad things are going to happen to you. So they were not
they take it
screwing
seriously.
around. Yeah, they really did. But it was way cool because they have these Italian bees, and there are beekeepers all over Australia and indeed even in Europe who come to get queens to take back.
Yes.
Because this is the only place.
Yeah, so that's the Italian subspecies. There's different types of subspecies of bees, but the Africanized bees you guys have is in Brazil is Apis mellifera scriptulata, but the Apis mellifera linguistica, which is the Italian honeybee, and they're very productive. They're very hardworking. They're honey producers. They're very gentle, but bees have been moved, and including in Italy where they originally came from. There's been a lot of introgression of other genetics, which might not be bad if you're a beekeeper. Maybe you don't really care if you have a mutt as long as they work for you. But for a bee breeder, and I'm one of them, I breed queen bees, so that's very near and dear to my heart. you also want to have some of the genetically pure genetics to go back to for whatever reason. And so that's why these are very valued. They're very isolated, and they're not going to have other bees coming in and adding genetics maybe that they don't want. And not even to mention what would happen if the Varroa parasite comes in.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to, I mean, the island itself is about 7 kilometers off the coast of mainland Australia.
I got some bees from, I didn't personally get them from there, but they're genetic. They came from Washington State University. And they were open mated, so they were not that much money, but they're from the Caucasus Mountains of Turkey and Georgia and that part of the world. And they had to get special permission to bring the drone semen in and make sure they weren't bringing any viruses, because bees are not really allowed to be brought into the United States. But that breeding program, they sell one of their queens, out of Washington State University. They sell an inseminated queen for $1,000. And people are like, oh my gosh, why would you spend so much for a single insect that could just die, And it's because those genetics are so important, because there's been a lot of inbreeding in the United States in particular, and even in Europe, where a lot of these different types of subspecies of bees, they've been sort of diluted. And the one thing about bees is that they're very well adapted to their ecosystem. And that's why the Africanized bees did so well in South America as compared to the European bees. But even in Europe, there are bees that do better in Southern Europe. There are types of bees. There's Apis mellifera mellifera, the dark bee. They do better in Northern Europe and over in the United Kingdom. And they might not be quite as productive. They might not be as gentle as, say, an Italian bee, but they're much more adapted to the local climate, like maybe a rainy, moist climate where they might actually go flying in search of nectar and pollen, where another type of bee that was ancestors were brought from somewhere else might not bother to do that. So that's why they take this very, very seriously whenever they have these places where the genetics are being kept. It's just for future breeding purposes.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, though. I wonder what other isolated bee strains are out there that we don't even know about.
And there's some of them that may actually have gone extinct. So there was a couple of, so Greece had some different subspecies of bees too, and they're not even sure if they even exist anymore. They identified them maybe in the 50s and 60s, and they're not even sure if they exist, and they might have been in a really, and maybe they weren't anything that was commercially valuable that they thought at the time, but even the Africanized bees have some traits that are useful. We just don't really want to have their defensive-ness if they're going to be in your backyard, but some of the disease-resistant traits might be a really good thing if you could find a way to capture that, without the baggage that you don't want. And how can we even predict what we might need in the future? And that's why it's so important to keep these strains of bees, and not just bees, but of any species or subspecies. And that's one of the things the Europeans are doing too in protecting a lot of their native bee subspecies, or races is what they call them, because they all interbreed freely, so they're all within the same species, but they're all different in their coloration and how they respond to differences in the climate. Some bees know or have evolved to know that the flow begins early in the spring, so they build up very quickly, whereas other types of bees have evolved in the place where most of the plants don't really begin blooming until late summer, so they kind of build their population up more slowly. And that can be very useful if you have that kind of bee in the place where you happen to be. But if it's mismatched, it might not work out so well for you or the bees.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what might happen if, like, these Africanized bees that are prevalent in South America, Central America, and Southern U.S. were selectively combined with, and with like some like these,
so
like
that's
this
an
Italian
interesting
breed.
thing too.
It's pretty hot in Italy, who knows? It might
so,
work.
So the other interesting thing too is the first hybrid, the F1 hybrids of the African and the European, they tend to be much more defensive, and then they sort of get a little bit less so, and they're still a lot more defensive than European bees. But they found in certain places where not only do the beekeepers learn to work them a little bit better, and not, there's things I can probably get away with my bees and nothing bad happens. But if I tried that with an Africanized colony, I'd pay for it. I'd learn my lesson. But But they have also found that even the Africanized bees, in general, they're much more defensive than European bees, but they can have some variations. So they've been trying to do some breeding experiments to maybe tone it down a little bit. Maybe it's not going to be as, they're maybe not going to be like little kittens like mine are usually, but still maybe to make them a little bit more workable. And my bees are like little kittens. Not all the time, but...
Fuzzy and occasionally prickly, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Kittens.
And capricious is all crap,
Active and busy, and occasionally prickly.
So it sounds like
Tom,
there's a
do you
lot
think
of...
that?
Go ahead, Thomas. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask Tom if he thinks that if you think that there's a better policy on bee genetics in the U.S. could be very beneficial to improve the current situation and the very poor genetic pool that we have here. Oh
wow, that's a really, really loaded question. I think it'll change when the beekeepers themselves want it to change. So one of the problems when you try to breed for something, so for many years before we had problems with the varroa mites, they were breeding for productivity, very productive bees. But sometimes we get bees that were a little bit grouchy and maybe not as nice. Again, they weren't anything like an Africanized bee. But the problem is some of those bees were so inbred because they were crossing with very closely related strains that they lost maybe some of the disease resistance or something that we call hygienic behavior, which is where the bees keep their hive clean. And up until about the 1950s, they were actually breeding for this hygienic behavior because of a disease called foul brood, which really they didn't have antibiotics back then, so there's no way to treat it. And so the only treatment was to burn the hive. You'd kill the bees and all, and it was devastating. And then they invented or developed antibiotics where they could maybe not, well, the European foul brood they could cure, but not the American foul brood, so they could kind of cover it up. But the American foul brood spores will stay in the comb for 50 or 70 years. Not that anybody will use a comb that's that old, but just saying if you found some old bee equipment in somebody's shed somewhere and said, oh yeah, my great-grandpa used it, you might not want to because you don't know what the bees had. And so they were able to cover it up so that breeding experiments for hygienic behavior kind of fell flat. They didn't do much with it until the varroa mites came, and then they started having to look at this a little bit more closely to try to breed for something that all honeybees have. They all have the ability to be hygienic, but some are a little bit more than others. And so trying to breed for that and then trying to breed for a more specific type of varroa mite resistance that all bees have, but some have more of, while at the same time not losing the traits that you want. Like you want them to be reasonably gentle, you want them to be reasonably productive, and all of those, and not swarm too much. And so part of the problem, though, is in 1922, they didn't allow any more bee importations into the United States because of another mite called tracheal mite, which actually is not a problem. We've bred for resistance for that, and we don't even worry about the tracheal mite anymore. But because of that, there's been a real bottleneck. And then when varroa came in some places, 80 or 90% of the feral bees in the United States were wiped out. All that were left were bees that were being pretty much bought by beekeepers, put into a hive, only to die and then be replaced. So there's a huge genetic bottleneck, and so whenever you can find a pocket of genetic diversity somewhere, whether it's a feral bee or it's a importation of a legal importation of genetics, and honestly, the Africanized bees were an importation of genetics too. Again, not necessarily what we all want if we're going to be working our bees in a populated area, but they're not all as bad as they were made out to be. Not to say that there's still not stinging events that that could be really devastating for someone if someone's elderly or if it's a pet or an animal that's outside that can't escape from them. So it'll be interesting to see. There might be some cross genetics with maybe some of the good things of the Africanized bees, while a dilution of some of the less good things over a long period of time. I mean, they've only been here for. I mean, the 1950s is when they learned Drew, so that's really not much time in genetics.
Certainly not much time in evolution.
Yeah.
No, especially if it's natural selection. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of beekeepers do in places like Texas and Arizona is they make sure they just requeen with a queen that was bred by a beekeeper, so they know what they're getting. So if they find a swarm, they might catch it, but then they'll make sure they requeen it so they don't because some of the colonies of Africanized bees can be reasonably nice at first, but then when they get big later on in the year, they could get pretty, much different personality. So a lot of, especially if someone's in an area where there's other people nearby, it's almost an obligation to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I suppose once a hive starts acting nasty, even requeening it, it's not going to fix it, or is it?
It will. A lot of that's genetic, but all bees can have a bad day, just like people.
Yeah.
I've been working my bees in a short sleeve T-shirt all summer, but last week I'm like, I better put on a veil. They're getting a little bit, and it wasn't even before they stung me. I could just tell how they kind of, like, all their little heads are looking at me when I open the hive. Their antennas are all looking at me, and I'm like, oh, they're watching me now. Normally they might be doing their thing, making honey, but now they're all looking at me like they weren't last week, or they might start flying up at me, and I'm like, I better put something on. But with an Africanized bee, they will actually, that will happen a lot faster. I mean, it's like the switch happens, and then they're already like at you. So, and European hives can be that way too. Even 30 years ago, there were some pretty hot, we call them hot hives that, they're very defensive, and they weren't Africanized. They were just bees that were that way. And so, that's something that I won't keep that kind of bee around, just because I love to be able to go out there and, not have to worry about, having them,
Swarm you.
Pay attention to me. Like, yeah, exactly. Come after me. Exactly. If I didn't do anything to deserve it.
It's interesting.
If I did something to deserve it, that's another thing.
It's interesting. One of the things I've seen here for varietal identification, and I was thinking about this earlier, but the conversation wasn't really going in this direction, but I just thought I'd bring it up now. There are honey providers that provide what they call Africanized bee honey, and they basically break it out as a varietal, because up until like the last several years, it was a thing,
Killer bee honey.
Yeah.
Killer bee honey, yeah. And
they just try to do it as a thing. It's not, whatever. It's just honey and they're made by honeybees. It's just a different subspecies of
strain
honeybees.
of honeybee. Yeah.
The flower matters way more than the bee.
Exactly.
I always thought that was really interesting, because I thought, well, okay, I mean, that's wonderful that it's produced by killer bees, which is what it's called, killer bee honey. Because, Thomas, that people, because they were really wiping out bees in the South for a while until they integrated and things settled down some. But when the African bees started coming into the southern part of the United States, they were aggressive enough that the non-African bees kind of got overrun. But yeah, so for a long time they were breaking it out as a thing. And in fact, I know at least a couple different places that have created killer bee mead, as like a product.
It's a gimmick thing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I thought it was just interesting, though, because a lot of people didn't realize, I mean, especially after listening to what you guys have talked about tonight, a lot more about the African or Africanized bees, and what's been happening with those.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really fascinating. I've learned a lot. There's, there's a lot of big holes in my knowledge OBs. Something I'm hoping to rectify over the next couple of years. But yeah, Thomas, thank you. This is great. So for those of you who are out there listening, or who may listen sometime between now and the middle of October, if you are a member of the AMMA, Bee Seasonal, and that's beeseasonal.com, will be offering discounts to all AMMA members to purchase their honey in varying quantities for delivery in mid-October. Yes, Thomas?
Yes, mid-October, exactly.
Okay. So mid-October, because they have to determine how much they need to package and in what packages, so that they get, it's a small operation, but they do big honeys. So be patient. It's worth it. Trust me, I've tasted their honeys. They are amazing. I particularly like the pink peppercorn. It's my personal favorite. Their honey, as you've heard, it's organic. It's sustainably sourced. and it's pure. It is not in any way adulterated. This honey is the real deal. So if you like making mead, or if you just like eating honey, you really want this stuff. Trust me on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the call.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thank you for coming on and telling people more about who you guys are. I hope we get to see you again at the MeadCon next March. That'd be great.
Next March, right? Is it going to be in Denver?
Yeah, it's the same place every year. We pair up with the Major Cup, and we have the whole week. So
that's true.
Yeah, if you guys can break away, you really need to come. You know, if you were you there for the Major last year? I don't remember if you stayed or not. It's always very blurry to me.
We didn't stay for the Major. We didn't stay for the Major Cup, but maybe next year. That would be interesting.
You should. It's a lot of fun, and there's just so many people to meet. So, and you should come to the Australian honey tasting and get to try the Aussie honeys. They're a lot of fun.
That's true. No, that's something that I would try to Denver for.
Yeah, I was impressed. They were completely different than all the other honeys I've tasted to date. So I really enjoy tasting honeys that are from outside the United States. I think it's really fun. So.
Yeah, cool. No, yeah, it would be nice to meet everyone and spend some more time with you guys on next March. That would be pretty cool.
It would be very cool. So, yeah, Mead. For those of you that are wondering what in the heck we're talking about, that is the 2019 MeadCon, Mead Conference, put on by the American Mead Makers Association. You can find out more about that at meadcon.net. All of the dates and sign-ups and everything, we're not selling tickets yet, but will be soon, are there. So, check it out. And we're going to have some pretty awesome vendors. With any luck, Bee Season will be one of them. So, that'll be really cool. So, check it out.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I really appreciate you coming on, and I know you guys just got back to the States like today, so.
Yeah, tomorrow we start early too, so.
Oh gosh, yeah. Then you should probably go get some sleep.
I will. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much, everyone. Tom, was a pleasure meeting you. I would definitely like to connect offline and exchange some information. That would be pretty cool. And yeah, thank you for everyone that listened there. And if you guys want to get in touch with us, you can send an email directly to me at thomas@beeseasonal.com. That is thomas@beeseasonal.com. And yeah, we have some pretty cool videos coming about some other things. Like, yeah, we have some pretty cool videos coming now in the near future. And
cool.
Yeah, stay tuned. Will be pretty cool.
Looking forward to it.
Fun.
That'll be cool. All right, then. Off with you. Off to bed. You have a show to do tomorrow.
And thank you very much.
And thank you so much
thank
for
you.
coming on Got Me Live. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and it was a pleasure. So we will talk soon.
All right. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Wow, Tom, that was so cool. I mean, I sat here listening to all of this going, I have no idea what some of the stuff they're talking about, but it sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So,
and it's so amazing for me. My first batches of mead I made were so absolutely terrible. I stuck with beer and wine and cider for years because as a beekeeper, I know how hard those bees work to make that honey, and I really valued honey. And I didn't know how, there was Ken's book wasn't out at that point. There wasn't the internet. And so I didn't make mead for a long time. And then I finally came back to it with a lot more knowledge. But I didn't want to make mead at first because I didn't know how to make good mead, and I didn't want to waste good honey. But when I came back, my meads turned out pretty good, I guess. But
yeah, judging by some of the
but I really have that connect.
I'd say you're doing okay.
Yeah, they're okay. Yeah, I think they do okay. But I really feel such a strong passion for both the bees and for the honey and for the, for the mead itself, and that's why I love to talk to people like Thomas and beekeepers I know and mead makers about, because we all have this similar passion, even though we might have different areas that we know more about or different knowledge. It's amazing for me to go through that process of raising a queen bee, putting her in her hive, having that hive flourish, putting that hive in a place, the flowers start blooming. It's a good year. You can see them bringing in that nectar and that they ripen that honey. I extract it, and then eventually, I ferment it, and hopefully it's something that's okay. It's just beautiful to have that connection to, all from the source all the way through to something that you get to enjoy in your glass, many months, later.
Yeah, that it is. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And how different it is everywhere you go. I mean,
yes,
it just blows me away. I mean, I know that the flora is
and yet not, and
different.
then some things are not. Some
yeah.
things are so different, and some things aren't. That's the beauty of it too. I try to visualize in my mind some of the places in Brazil that he was describing, and of course I got on the internet and I looked at photos, and that doesn't even tell you hardly anything. I mean, that doesn't tell you what it smells like to be there, and what it sounds like, and all of the other things of an ecosystem. And yet, I mean, the bees are the bees. Yeah, you have to handle the African bees differently, obviously, but they're still bees, and
they're just bees with more attitude is all,
they're not. You're going to have to handle them differently, but and it's still honey, and it's
just flavored differently.
Nectar that they brought in from. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the base is still honey, very recognizably and very obviously honey, but then so much interesting flavor profiles brought to it. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a friend who was working on he was a mead maker and a honey enthusiast who was working in Jamaica on some solar power projects down there, and he would call me and tell me about the honeys he was finding. And Jamaica it's like Australia, it's a microcosm, so it's its own place. It's uninvaded by other places because it doesn't have those contiguous land borders, with other countries. And so he was telling me about the honeys that were coming from the bees there because of the huge proliferation of flowers and floral sources and fruits and so forth that are to be found in Jamaica. And I was just salivating while he was telling me this. Was like, oh my God, I want to taste all of these honeys, So I'm hoping I'll have to talk to Thomas.
And a lot of
they need to go look at Jamaica.
And
it's another place to bring honeys from.
And folks who don't know about honey or about bees or about flowers, they don't realize there's so you go to the store and you can buy a light amber or you can buy a dark honey, and people just assume they're all the same because they don't know. And it's pretty interesting, when you do a honey tasting for people that are unfamiliar with the different honeys. And the best thing is when you pair that with a mead itself, so you can see what the flavor that comes through that doesn't. But it's and every year is different. We had a really great sweet clover year. My friend Wayne down in Nebraska, he's a commercial beekeeper friend. He had a great sweet clover year. I know he was trying to sell, part of the AMMA, one of the deals that they just did, and it was a new thing for him because he doesn't really even have a website or anything. So, but it's really nice to see a year where you get some really great honey like that. But it's not like that every year, and it's similar to growing grapes. If you're trying to make wine, there might be a year where you get high production, but the grapes maybe don't have quite as good a flavor. Maybe another year it's more of a drought year. Maybe the grapes are more flavorful, but you have lower volume of juice produced. But that's one of the things I love about it. Every year is a challenge. Every batch of mead is different for me. People ask, my recipes. I'm like, I can't really tell you a step. I mean, I can tell you what the ingredients are, but you're going to have to make it for yourself and put your own, your own personal artistic, and don't try to copy me. I mean, I'm flattered, but make your own version of it. Yeah.
Well, and like they say, a lot of people, I mean, mead makers more often than not do, but, just a lot of people sort of in general don't really realize that, even if you just get quote unquote plain old wildflower honey or clover honey, which are, considered to be sort of the most generic of honeys in theory, that the honey that you get in the spring is totally different than the honey you get in the fall because the wildflowers are different.
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Well,
So,
that was really nice having Thomas on and talking about those Brazilian honeys, because that's something I really don't know very much at all about
yeah, me neither.
the flora down there, and yeah.
Well, the
Cool.
flora in
Well, maybe
Australia
if I win the
shocked
lottery,
the
I'll be
crap
able
out of
to take
me.
a trip down there and meet all those beekeepers. That would be very interesting.
I'm telling you, it's research and development and tax write-off, dude. Seriously. I mean, if you can come up with the money ahead of time, then you can write it off at the end of the year, and that's cool. And I managed it. Basically, I had to sort of put everything on credit cards, for this
Credit
trip.
cards.
Yeah, and then it'll all come back.
There's I'd like to go to. I like to go to Australia. I like to go to the European countries. I mean, there's actually all over the world I'd like to go. But yeah.
I'm hoping to get down to South America at some point. That's one of the places I'd really love to visit. But next year, with any luck at all, if I can save the money and get things lined up, I hope to go to the European Mead Makers Association annual meeting next year. And they're going to have like a conference. So they wanted me to come this year, and I was like, I would love to, except I just got back from Australia, and we've got like a late anniversary trip that we're taking to Disney with no kids and no dogs in October, and I'm going to be completely broke. So, and I've used up all my airline points,
Well,
so yeah, I'm kind of screwed right now.
Well, I need to sign off. It's late here for me. So I have an early day tomorrow. So it's been a lot of fun, but I probably better sign off myself and.
Yeah, we're running late anyway. So Tom, thank you so much for coming on, and you are
anytime.
Always welcome on the show. And thank you so much for being our honey expert, because I think AJ and I would have been utterly lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah, we wouldn't have even begun to ask some of the questions and make some of the comments that you did. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for your insight.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure. So, but I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Take care.
Good.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
So that was pretty cool. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Certainly a lot of it was over my head, but I'm going to be going back and listening to it and trying to figure out what in the heck they were talking about. Some of you probably got that, and maybe you learned something. I know I did tonight. So that was pretty cool. I think we need to do more of this in the future. Maybe every couple of months, have like a high-level bee conversation kind of thing. But in the meantime, we're running over, and so we're going to go ahead and let you know upcoming, and then let you guys get on with your lives, and I have to go back to hurricane prep, because I'm literally in the barrel of the gun of Flo pointed right at us. Raleigh is ground zero, apparently, even though we're not going to get the full hurricane effect. That's basically, we're headed straight for us, so it's like, oh, crap. Anyway, coming up.
I now do have a really good answer for why I live where the air hurts my face.
Yeah, honestly,
I don't have to deal with that shit.
If we lose power
for 2
weeks,
day.
it's gonna suck, because it's gonna be like 90 degrees, super humid, and no air conditioning. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna be hating life. But we'll figure it out. Okay.
Good luck.
Yeah, well, I'll be alive, and that's what's important. Okay, upcoming September 12th, i.e. tomorrow, Buzz Bee Meadery has the OWLS Buzz Bee Meadery program. Go check it out. The links are all on the show page for this episode, so just go check it out. September 22nd, Starlight Meadery has their Mead Day celebration and fall festival. I plan to be there. So if you're even thinking about it, if you're anywhere in the central North Carolina area and can get there, and assuming that we aren't all dead by then, because, Florence is coming, and I'm sure we'll be alive. It might just be a little damp, but I plan to be there. So I hope to see you guys there as well. September 23rd, Black's Ferry Meadery. This is a newish meadery, one that I just found out about a couple of months ago. They're having the pickle game, and pints, and that sounds like it's going to be fun too. That's all Yeah, I know, right? That's all I got for right now. If you guys got an event or know of an event, please let me know. Email me at gotmead@gotmead.com, and I will put it on the show. I really appreciate it. Coming up next week, we've got Scott from Kingsview Mead, another newish meadery, just coming out in the last year or so. So we're going to talk to them, see what they're doing, what kind of honey they're using, what kind of mead they're making, and find out, what they're up to. So, and again, if you guys know people you'd like to have on the show, or you think somebody that really needs to be on here, you need to let us know. Gotmead@gotmead.com. Tell us about it. We'll see if we can get them on here. So that's all I got for tonight. How about you, AJ?
I got nothing else.
Cool. All right, y'all. Have a good one. We'll see you back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week. And have a good one. Those of you that are in Eastern North, South Carolina, and Virginia, stay safe, please. You are in our thoughts. And those of you that are with me in Central North Carolina or South Carolina, just remember the floods can get us too. Take it easy, be careful, and please stay safe. And we'll see y'all next week. Take care.
Stay safe, everyone.